What's up, everybody? This is Jason, Zombie Collector, and I'm doing a review of the movie The Witches, starring Angelica Houston, back when she was smoking. So they remade this movie recently with the chick from the Princess movie, Princess Diaries or whatever. I can't remember. She also was Catwoman. I can't even remember her name because she's not worthy to even remember her name. But this movie was actually really good. I went back. I haven't watched it since it came out, like that late '80s, early '99, '90, something like that. And I'd seen it when I was probably about 10, 11 years old. I don't think I've seen it since. And I completely forgot it took place in England. Because Angelica Houston is an American actress, and I remember her being in like stuff like Addams Family and all that. But she plays like a Karen. I think like kind of like some kind of really to the next level German type character. But it takes place in England, and essentially it's a witches convention that comes together in this like sleepy English side resort, and the witches hate children, and she's come up with a concoction that you can like give a child. You can mix it into a bunch of candies and chocolates and give it to children, and they turn into mice. And that's essentially the whole movie. That is it. Like they're getting together so she can, give money to all these other witches from around Europe, and they can all open up their own candy stores to then get rid of children by giving them candies and chocolates, and have them turn into mice, where they can then step on and crush, which they show you that will happen later on, but not with the children. And at the beginning of the movie, it's real dark. The kid's like staying with his grandma, the little boy, and his parents die in a car wreck or something, and it's like this whole big thing. I mean, like 80s movies, guys, if you don't know, like nowadays, kids' movies are all like sunshine and rainbows and, daffodils and leaping through the park and all this stuff. But back in the 80s and even in the early 90s, like they would like have deal with some traumatic crap in their movies, and you're like, dang, this is for kids? But that also, I think, says the Generation X, the generation my generation came from, we're totally different. We can handle a little bit of disagreements, a little bit of, not everything being coddled and then spoon fed to us. And we're not, hopefully, some of us still left are not so easily offended and whatnot. But I digress. So, anyways, you have this, and so of course the little boy, he stumbles upon their plot to destroy the world by turning little children into mice. And of course, they catch him and his little sidekick. I can't remember. He has a little fat sidekick. I can't remember his name, but it's like something like Frederick or something. And they turn them into mice. And I forgot how intense the mouse turning in scenes are, because they do it a handful of times to a handful of children and adults. It is pretty intense. And the cool thing is my son, who is now 12, I turned it on because I was just going to watch it by myself. And he kind of came through the room and was like, what are you watching? I'm like, oh, The Witches. And he was like, oh, the new movie? And I'm like, oh, God, no, not the new movie. And apparently he had seen a review or preview or trailer for it. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about the OG. And he was like, oh, okay. And I was like, you want to watch it? And he had an iPad. He was kind of like, man, I'll just sit here with you, Dad, and just, we'll be in the same room. I'm sure we all have that experience if you have kids that are like teenagers or teenager-ish, as we call in my family, teenagers. And he sat in there, and then it was like with the iPad, and like it was like in the first 20 minutes, he sat down, so he missed the very first part, which was no big deal, quite frankly. And then you could tell he was looking at the iPad. He's like watching, looking at the iPad and watching. And then he was like, and then the iPad was closed and put to the side. And he was like this. And I'm like, that is good filmmaking. That is something that draws kids in. So this movie still works, guys. So if you have teenagers or early teens, late elementary school, maybe 6th, 7th grade, I think this movie still works. Apparently it did for my son, because he's a pretty fickle movie fan at this point. And he really liked it, but you could tell the scenes were pretty intense, and he was kind of like, oh, okay. And because the kids are gyrating and shaking and spitting, and the creature effects are going there when they're spinning around and smoking and all this stuff. And, as they turn into mice. And so anyways, and then they have scenes where it's still pretty good. They have real mice mixed in with animatronic mice throughout the movie. And sometimes it's hard to tell which one's which. as they're moving around and doing like things. So that's kind of cool because it shows you that they weren't having CGI wasn't a thing back then. So essentially, they have to find a way to try to the grandmother is now dealing with the children who turn into mice, the two boys, and she's trying to stop the witches, as with the little boys slash mice, try to ruin their plans. And obviously, there's spoilers here. They obviously are successful. Angelica Houston character ends up eventually turning into an evil creature mouse thing, where it looks more like something came out of Fraggle Rock. It's like this huge, skinless rat more than a mouse, because she's like the head witch or whatever you call that of the coven. And so this is very interesting. Mr. Bean's in this, Rowan Atkinson. He plays a great character. And then there's like scenes where he's like having sex with like one of the hotel, what do you call that? I can't think of the hotel maids. And it's like my son was like, "What's going on here?" And I'm like, because he's like, she's coming out all disheveled, and he's like trying to put up his little tie and everything. And I'm like, wow. So the subject matter was quite different than, that stuff kind of goes over your head when you're a kid. But as a parent, you're like, oh, okay, Mr. Bain, look at him. He has somebody's having some fun. So anyways, so the movie's really good. I think it still holds up today. The remake they did was, I saw the previews, it looked awful. It's another thing where they try to all they did was change the color of the grandma and the kid, the little boy, nothing different. And then the girl who plays the Princess Diaries or whatever, apparently she got blowback because she has some sort of the character they created. The only reason I know this because I saw her groveling, piss poor apology, where apparently in that movie she has these I don't know, hooked hands or something, or like cloved hands, I guess, for lack of better words. And there was some I don't know, some what do you call that? Some agency, some sort of group, I guess, that was trying to make her feel guilty that kind of representation is traumatic for children who deal with this or people who deal with that condition. It's they're obviously not making fun. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the movie, of the review, is people just look to be offended. Obviously this movie was, the witches are supposed to be witches. They're supposed to look evil and gross and grotesque. I mean, no one's making fun of anybody who actually has some sort of condition that. If I was watching, I have health conditions. First, I'm fat, so there's that. When I see a fat character being made fun of or whatever, I don't get offended and start crying and feel like this is a personal attack on me. I'm watching the movie. Either I like the movie or I don't like the movie. It has nothing to do with the characters, unless I guess that the whole movie was there to just berate a character, I guess, maybe. But even then, I'd be like, okay, because guess what? I have the power to go click and turn it off. So she ends up doing this apology tour where she's like, oh, I learned something today, and my choices will be different moving forward, as every Hollywood person says nowadays. Anytime they do anything that offends anybody in any scenario, in any given situation, this is let me just fake apology just to calm the storm until the next blue check marks go out to somebody else. So again, I mean, that remake, I cannot guarantee you is garbage, aside from maybe CGI obviously making it look better or in that capacity. But I mean, again, if you're going to watch something, watch the original. It holds up today. My son, who obviously had never seen the remake or the original until last week, watched this and loved it. And so there you go. 2021, watched it. Kid doesn't have any interest unless it's old-timey movies, and he dug it. So Angelica Houston was awesome, over the top, ridiculous. You kind of forget how good of an actress she really was, and this so goofy, her being Morticia Addams. When I saw her show up or pop up in John Wick Part 3, I was like, oh, Angelica Houston, wow, haven't seen you in a while. So it was good to see her kind of in her prime, so to speak. But it was a great movie. Let me know what you all think below. Did you like The Witches? Do you remember The Witches? Did you ever watch The Witches? Have you seen their remake? What do you think? You know, because my opinion is just my opinion. And let me know what you think, guys. Until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.